The galaxy had long since accepted certain truths as absolute. The Velcrin Empire controlled the outer spiral arms with their plasma shields that could withstand a supernova. The Thrain Collective possessed gravity manipulation technology that could collapse stars. The ancient Nomori had mastered consciousness transfer, effectively becoming immortal. These were facts, immutable as the laws of physics themselves. And humanity? Humanity was a legend whispered in the darker corners of spacefaring taverns. A myth told to frighten young cadets. A species that supposedly came from a death world so hostile that evolution itself had forged them into something terrifying. But no one had ever seen a human. No probe had ever returned from their supposed system. No signal had ever been intercepted. Most scholars agreed humans were fiction, a story invented by the Thrain to justify their military expansion. After all, what purpose did myth serve if not to unite people against a common, imaginary threat? Commander Davin of the Velcrin Third Fleet believed this completely. He had studied xenobiology at the Imperial Academy, had catalogued 417 sentient species, and not once had any evidence of humanity surfaced. When his science officer, a young Thrain named Mirai, presented her thesis suggesting humans might be real, he had laughed until his breathing apparatus fogged. That was before the war. The conflict began as most do, with a border dispute. The Kraven swarm, a hive-minded species of insectoid warriors, had been expanding aggressively for decades. They consumed worlds, stripped them bare, and moved on like locusts through a field. The Velcrin had tolerated them because their territory lay far enough away to be someone else's problem. Then the swarm entered the Helian sector. 17 colonies burned in the first week. The Velcrin fleet, proud and powerful, met the swarm at the Barrier Nebula. It should have been a decisive victory. The Velcrin had numbers, technology, and the experience of 1,000 campaigns. They were slaughtered. Davin watched from the bridge of the Eternal Aegis as 300 warships were torn apart by the Kraven. The creatures didn't just fight. They swarmed with a coordination that defied conventional tactics. For every Kraven ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Their vessels were organic, grown rather than built, and they regenerated damage faster than the Velcrin could inflict it. The fleet retreated. It was the first time in 4 centuries that Velcrin forces had fled from battle. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council convened. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the floating citadel above Thrain Prime. Davin stood among them, his uniform still stained with the emergency foam that had sealed his ship's hull breaches. The mood was grim. Species that had been rivals for millennia now faced a common extinction. The Kraven were coming, and no one knew how to stop them. It was Mirai who spoke up during the open forum. Her voice was small at first, but it carried through the chamber's acoustics. "There is one option we haven't considered," she said. "We could search for the humans." The chamber erupted in clicking, chirping, and electromagnetic protests. Mirai stood her ground, her slim frame trembling but her voice growing stronger. "Every myth has a seed of truth. The legends all agree on certain points. Humans come from a high-gravity world with extreme climate variations. They evolved as persistence predators. They wage war not just with technology, but with something called tactical creativity. And most importantly, their homeworld lies in a region of space that all our maps designate as the Dark Zone, an area where no expedition has ever returned. Because there's nothing there," someone shouted. "Or because something there ensures nothing returns," Mirai countered. "I propose we send a volunteer expedition. Not to invade, but to seek aid. If humans exist and are even half as dangerous as the legends suggest, they might be our only hope against the swarm." The debate raged for hours. In the end, desperation won over skepticism. A small fleet would be assembled, volunteers only, and sent into the Dark Zone. It would be commanded by someone experienced enough to handle first contact. If anything was found, they chose Davin. He accepted, though he still believed they were chasing ghosts. As he prepared his ship and selected his crew, Mirai approached him with a data tablet. "I'm coming with you," she said. "This isn't a research expedition, which is exactly why you need me. If we find them, someone needs to know how to talk to them. I've studied every fragment of human mythology we have. Their languages, their customs, their psychology. I can help." Davin looked at the young scientist. She had idealism in her eyes, the kind that usually got people killed in his line of work. But she also had courage, and he respected that. "Fine. But when we find nothing but empty space, I expect you to admit you were wrong. Deal, Mireille said, extending her hand in the Thrain gesture of agreement. The expedition consisted of 3 ships, the Eternal Aegis, the research vessel Curiosity, and the supply carrier Morning Light. 87 souls in total, heading toward a region of space that had swallowed every probe, drone, and ship that had dared enter it. As they approached the boundary of the dark zone, Davin stood on his bridge watching the stars ahead. They looked the same as any other stars. There was no ominous glow, no visible barrier, nothing to suggest this region was any different from the rest of the galaxy. All ships, proceed to jump coordinates, he commanded. Let's see what's really out here. The 3 vessels engaged there, faster than light drives, and leaped forward into the unknown. None of them noticed the small object that had been watching them from the edge of the nebula. It was barely larger than a fist, covered in stealth plating that rendered it invisible to their sensors. As the expedition vanished into jump space, the object turned and accelerated away, moving faster than any ship in the Galactic Council's fleet. It carried a simple message to its creators. They're coming. The transition from jump space felt different this time. Davin had made thousands of faster-than-light jumps in his career, and each one followed the same pattern. A brief moment of disorientation, a flash of impossible colors, then emergence into normal space with minimal turbulence. This time, the Eternal Aegis shuddered like it had struck something solid. Alarms blared across the bridge, and Davin gripped his command chair as the deck tilted beneath him. "Report," he barked. His navigation officer, a 4-armed Quillian named Taman, worked frantically at his console. Jump coordinates were accurate, but something pulled us off course at the last second. We're 30,000 kilometers from the planned emergence point. The other ships? The Curiosity emerged safely. Morning Light is still in jump space, trying to compensate. On the main view screen, space looked wrong. It took Davin a moment to identify what disturbed him. There were no stars. They floated in a void so complete that his mind struggled to process it. Only the faint light from their own ships and a distant, dim sun broke the absolute blackness. "Where are the stars?" Mireille whispered, stepping onto the bridge. "We're in a stellar void," Taman said, reading his instruments with increasing confusion. A bubble of space roughly 2 light-years across with almost no stellar bodies. This shouldn't exist naturally. Stellar formation doesn't leave gaps like this. Davin felt a chill run through his circulation system. "Scan for artificial structures. If something cleared this area, I want to know what." The sensors began their sweep. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then the Morning Light finally emerged from jump space, its hull scorched and venting atmosphere from a dozen points. "They're requesting emergency docking," the communications officer reported. "Permission granted. Get them into the Aegis's repair bay." As the wounded ship limped toward them, Taman's eyes widened at his console. "Commander, I'm detecting something." Multiple objects at the edge of sensor range. They're not moving, but they're massive. On screen, the view screen shifted, magnifying a section of the void. At first, Davin saw nothing but darkness. Then the computer enhanced the image, and he understood why so many ships had disappeared in this region. They were looking at a graveyard. Hundreds of ships floated in the void, maybe thousands. Some were intact, others shattered into fragments. Davin recognized Velcrin designs, Thrain construction, even ancient Nomari vessels that shouldn't have existed anymore. Every ship was dark, lifeless, and covered in what looked like impact scoring. "What happened to them?" Mireille breathed. "They were killed," Davin said. "Something destroyed them and left them here as a warning." "Or as a barrier," Taman suggested. "Look at the pattern. They're not randomly scattered. They form a rough sphere around something." Davin studied the formation. The navigation officer was right. The dead ships created a hollow shell, and at the center of that shell, barely visible on their sensors, was a star system. "Is that Sewell?" Mireille asked, leaning forward. "If it is, then those ships are everyone who tried to reach it," Davin said. "The question is what destroyed them." His answer came moments later when the proximity alarms screamed. "Incoming objects," Taman shouted. Fast movers, multiple contacts, they appeared out of nowhere. The view screen showed a dozen small craft accelerating toward them. They were unlike any ship design Davin had seen. Sleek, angular, with aggressive lines that suggested violence even at rest. They moved with a coordination that reminded him uncomfortably of the Craven Swarm. But these were clearly technological, not organic. Shields up, Weapons charged. Hail them on all frequencies. The communications officer worked his panel. No response, Commander. They're not acknowledging. The strange ships split into 3 groups, each targeting one of the expedition vessels. They moved faster than anything in the Council's fleet, accelerating and changing direction with G-forces that should have liquefied any organic pilot. They're locking weapons on us, Taman warned. Davin made his decision. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Do not fire unless fired upon. We came here to make contact, not start a war. The Eternal Aegis rolled hard, its inertial dampeners struggling to compensate. The strange ships pursued, matching every maneuver perfectly. They were toying with the expedition, Davin realized. These craft could have destroyed them already if that was their intent. Then one of the strange ships did something impossible. It stopped. Not decelerated, stopped. Full velocity to 0 in less than a second. The maneuver should have turned the pilot into paste against the bulkhead. A voice crackled over the communication system. It spoke in a language Davin didn't recognize, harsh and angular, full of sounds his species couldn't produce. Mireille gasped. That's English. Ancient English. One of the theoretical human languages. Can you translate? She worked frantically with her tablet, cross-referencing against her research. They're saying something about identification. Wait. They want to know who we are and why we're here. Tell them we're peaceful explorers seeking contact with humanity. Mireille spoke into the communication system, her pronunciation awkward but comprehensible. There was a long silence. Then the strange ships pulled back slightly, forming a loose perimeter around the expedition fleet. The voice returned, speaking more slowly this time. Mireille translated in real time. They're asking if we're aware we've entered restricted space. They say no unauthorized vessels are permitted beyond the barrier. They say... She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. They say they are the outer defense force of the human territories. The bridge fell silent. Davin stared at the ships on the view screen, at the dead fleet floating beyond, at the distant star that might be the legendary soul humans were real. And judging by the graveyard surrounding their world, they had spent centuries killing anyone who tried to reach them. Ask them, Davin said carefully, if they would be willing to speak with us. Tell them we come not as invaders but as refugees. Tell them the galaxy is dying and we need their help. Mireille translated. Another long pause. Then one of the strange ships moved forward, and Davin saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. A light came on in the craft's cockpit, and through the transparent canopy he saw the pilot. It was a human. A real human. They were smaller than the legends suggested, bipedal, with 2 arms and 2 legs covered in a form-fitting suit. But their eyes, those eyes were alert and intelligent and utterly alien in their intensity. The human pilot gestured, a universal signal. Follow me. All ships, maintain formation, Davin ordered. We're about to see what lies beyond the myths. As they passed through the field of dead ships, Davin noticed something he had missed before. Every vessel bore the same type of damage. Precise surgical strikes to the engines and life support systems. These ships hadn't been destroyed in battle. They had been disabled and their crews allowed to die in the void. It was a terrifying form of mercy. A warning that required no translation. Stay away. And now they were heading directly toward the ones who had done this, into a trap from which no one had ever escaped. Davin glanced at Mireille. The young scientist's eyes shone with wonder rather than fear. She was watching the human pilot's ship with the fascination of someone seeing a god made flesh. He hoped her faith would be enough, because they were about to learn whether humanity was their salvation or just another way to die. The human pilot led them deeper into the system, past the graveyard of ships and into the solar wind of the star they called Sol. As they traveled, more human vessels appeared, emerging from what seemed like empty space. They were using stealth technology far beyond anything the Council possessed. How many are there? Davin asked. Taman studied his sensors. I count 47 ships now, but there could be hundreds more we're not detecting. Their stealth systems are incredibly sophisticated. The expedition fleet traveled for 6 hours before a planet came into view. It wasn't the blue-green world the legends described as Earth. This was Mars, according to Mireille's research, a rust-colored sphere that humans had colonized centuries ago. And it was armed to the teeth. Defense platforms orbited the planet in layers, thousands of them, creating overlapping fields of fire that could reduce a fleet to atoms. Davin had seen the Council's most heavily defended worlds, but this was something else entirely. This was paranoia made manifest. They really don't want visitors, Taman muttered. The human pilot's ship signaled for them to enter a specific approach corridor. Any deviation, Davin suspected, would result in immediate destruction. They complied, threading their way through the maze of defenses until a massive space station came into view. It was a ring structure, rotating to generate artificial gravity. With docking arms extending like the petals of a mechanical flower, lights shone from thousands of windows, and smaller craft buzzed around it like insects around a hive. "They're directing us to Docking Bay 7, the communications officer reported. As the Eternal Aegis maneuvered toward the designated bay, Davin assembled a landing party. Mirai insisted on coming, of course, along with Taman and 6 security officers. They would be the first Council representatives to make official contact with humanity, if they survived the next hour. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Aegis. As their shuttle touched down, Davin saw humans moving about the bay, dozens of them, all wearing form-fitting suits in various colors. They worked with an efficiency that suggested long practice, moving equipment and performing maintenance with casual expertise. The shuttle ramp extended. Davin took a deep breath and stepped out. Gravity hit him immediately. It was stronger than he expected, not crushing but definitely noticeable. The legend said humans evolved on a high-gravity world, and now he believed it. Every step felt heavier, and he saw his security officers struggling to maintain their balance. A group of humans approached. The one in front was female, Davin thought, though their sexual dimorphism was subtle compared to many species. She removed her helmet, revealing short dark hair and features that were simultaneously familiar and alien. She was young, perhaps equivalent to 30 cycles in Velcrin terms, with sharp eyes that assessed the visitors with military precision. "I am Captain G1 of the Mars Defense Force," she said in accented but comprehensible galactic common. "Welcome to human space. We apologize for the aggressive reception, but as you've seen, we have reasons to be cautious." Mirai stepped forward before Davin could speak. "We understand. I am Mirai, xenolinguist of the Fray Collective. We came seeking humanity, believing you might be able to help us against a threat that is consuming the galaxy." G1's expression didn't change. "The Craven Swarm, we know. We've been monitoring your communications since you entered Council space." Davin felt his stomach drop. "You've been watching us? For how long?" "Since you discovered radio," G1 said simply. "We've monitored every spacefaring species in this region for the past 4 centuries. We know about the Council, the wars, the politics, everything. You just didn't know about us, but why?" Mirai asked. "Why hide? Why kill everyone who tried to find you?" G1 gestured for them to follow. She led them through the bay and into a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were lined with what looked like memorial plaques, thousands of them, each bearing a name and date. "Because the first time we made contact with an alien species, they tried to exterminate us," G1 said. 273 years ago, we detected a signal from a nearby star system. We sent a ship to investigate, crew of 47 scientists and diplomats, all excited to meet other intelligent life. The species we found was the Velcrin. Davin felt ice form in his veins. "Your ancestors destroyed our ship without warning. They captured 3 survivors and dissected them alive, studying them to understand human biology. Then they sent a fleet toward Earth, planning to claim our world as a new colony. They thought we were primitive, harmless." G1 stopped in front of a large plaque. It showed the image of a ship, the UNSV Horizon, and the names of its crew. "We weren't harmless. We were scared and angry and desperate. In 3 years, we went from barely having a presence in our own solar system to having a military fleet capable of destroying the Velcrin expedition. We killed every last one of them. Then we analyzed their technology, reverse-engineered it, and improved it. And we decided that we would never again let the galaxy know we existed." "The barrier," Davin said. "The graveyard. Every ship that came too close was disabled and its crew allowed to die. Harsh but necessary. We couldn't risk any communication getting out. We needed time to build our defenses to become strong enough that no one could threaten us." "And now?" Mirai asked softly. G1 resumed walking. "Now the swarm is a bigger threat than secrecy. Our projections show that if the Craven aren't stopped, they'll consume the entire galaxy within 50 years. including us. So humanity has a decision to make: stay hidden and eventually die, or emerge and help a galaxy that once tried to kill us. They entered an observation deck. Through the massive windows, Earth hung in the distance, a perfect blue-green sphere shrouded in white clouds. Davin had seen 1,000 worlds, but something about this one took his breath away. Perhaps because it was humanity's cradle. Perhaps because it had forged a species capable of nursing a grudge for 2 centuries. "You hate us," Davin said. "Some of us do," G1 admitted. "But hate is expensive. It requires resources we might need elsewhere. Humanity has debated for decades whether to make contact with the Council. The swarm has forced our hand." She turned to face them directly. "I've been authorized to take you to Earth, to the Council of Nations, where our leaders will decide whether humanity will help you. But I need you to understand something first. We are not the myth you came looking for. We're not noble saviors or ancient warriors. We're survivors who learned to be paranoid because the alternative was extinction." "What do you need from us?" Davin asked. "The truth," G1 said. "Everything you know about the swarm, the Council's military capabilities, political dynamics, resource distribution, everything. If we're going to save your civilizations, we need to understand them, and in return we'll show you why humanity doesn't lose wars." She smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. "You're about to learn what it means when a species spends 2 centuries preparing for revenge against an entire galaxy." Davin looked at Mireille. The young scientist's expression was complex, mixing awe with something like horror. They had found humanity. But the humans they found were nothing like the legends. They were harder, colder, shaped by isolation and betrayal into something that scared even themselves. "We accept your terms," Davin said. "When do we leave for Earth?" "Immediately," G1 said. "Your ships will remain here, but you and your staff will come with us. We have much to discuss and little time. The swarm doesn't sleep, and neither can we." As they boarded the human transport shuttle, Davin noticed the other humans watching them with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. The weight of 2 centuries of isolation hung heavy in the air. Humanity had spent generations preparing for the day the galaxy came knocking again. Now that day had arrived, and the galaxy was begging for help. The irony was not lost on anyone. Earth's orbital space was more densely packed than any system Davin had ever seen. Stations, satellites, defense platforms, and ships filled every viable orbit. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, every celestial body weaponized or fortified or both. The transport shuttle descended through the atmosphere, and Davin experienced his first direct exposure to humanity's home. The gravity pressed down on him like a physical weight, making every breath an effort. He watched Mireille struggle to adjust, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Is the gravity always this intense?" she gasped. G1, moving with casual ease, nodded. 1.3 times Thrain standard. "You'll adapt in a few days. Human children grow up learning to function under this pressure. It makes us denser, stronger, more resilient than most species." Through the shuttle's windows, Davin saw clouds part to reveal the surface below. Vast cities sprawled across continents connected by transportation networks that glowed with energy. But between the cities he saw something unexpected: wilderness. Massive stretches of forest, ocean, and mountain remained untouched. "You haven't fully developed your world," Taman observed. "We learned from watching other species," G1 said. "Uncontrolled expansion leads to ecological collapse. We preserve nature not out of sentiment but survival. A planet is an ecosystem. Destroy it, and you destroy yourself." The shuttle landed in what G1 called Geneva, a city built around a massive lake in a region of impressive mountains. The Council of Nations met here, in a building that looked more like a work of art than a military headquarters. But art could be deceptive. Davin noticed the defensive emplacements hidden in the architecture, the blast-resistant windows, the subtle force field generators. Even humanity's government center was a fortress. They were escorted through security that scanned them in ways Davin couldn't identify. Humans in uniforms watched them with professional wariness. No one was hostile, but no one was friendly either. They were specimens under observation, potential threats to be assessed. The council chamber was circular, with seats arranged in concentric rings. Representatives from dozens of human nations filled those seats, their faces showing the remarkable diversity of their species. Different skin tones, facial structures, body types, all united under one planetary government. At the center stood a podium, and behind it sat 3 individuals who radiated authority. 2 men and 1 woman, all older, all bearing expressions of controlled intensity. Jiwan led them to the center. "Honored representatives," she said, her voice carrying perfectly through the chamber's acoustics. "I present Commander Davin of the Velcrin 3rd Fleet, researcher Mirai of the Thrain Collective, and Navigator Taman of the Quillian Exploratory Service. They have come seeking humanity's aid against the Kraven swarm." One of the men at the central podium stood. He was tall, with gray hair and features that suggested both Asian and European ancestry. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of command. "I am Secretary General Hyunwoo, current leader of the United Nations of Earth. Commander Davin, your presence here represents a significant moment. For the first time in 273 years, humanity is engaging in official contact with alien civilizations. The fact that this contact is happening at all should tell you how seriously we take the swarm threat." Davin stepped forward, his body aching from the gravity. "Secretary General, I must first apologize on behalf of the Velcrin Empire. The actions of my ancestors against your people were unconscionable. We cannot undo that harm, but perhaps we can prevent greater harm from occurring." Hyunwoo's expression softened slightly. "Your apology is noted, Commander, but understand that many in this chamber lost family in what we call the First Contact War. The wounds are old but not healed. However, we are not governed by vengeance. We are governed by logic, and logic dictates that the swarm represents an existential threat to all life in this galaxy, including humanity." Mirai spoke up. "We have brought all the data we could compile on the swarm. Their tactics, biology, technology, everything the Council has learned in 5 years of conflict. We hope it will be useful." "Upload it to the Central Archive," Hyunwoo said. A human technician approached with a device and Mirai transferred the data. "Now tell us in your own words what you've observed. Sometimes the most valuable intelligence is what people don't think to write down." For the next 3 hours, Davin and his team described everything they knew about the Kraven swarm. The relentless expansion, the hive mind coordination, the organic ships that healed faster than they could be damaged, the sheer numbers that overwhelmed every defense. The human representatives listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on devices Davin didn't recognize. Their focus was absolute, their questions precise and insightful. These were people who understood war at a fundamental level. When the briefing finished, Hyunwoo called a recess. Davin and his team were escorted to a waiting room where food and water had been provided. The food was strange but edible, and the water tasted remarkably pure. "What do you think?" Taman asked quietly.
"Will they help us?"
"They're considering it," Davin said. "But they're also calculating costs and benefits. Humans think strategically. They won't commit to a war unless they believe they can win." Mirai was staring out the window at the city below. "They're magnificent," she whispered. "And terrifying. Did you see how they processed information? No species in the Council analyzes data that quickly. It's like their minds work on a different level. Predator minds," Davin said. "Evolved to track prey, predict behavior, identify patterns. The legends said humans were persistence hunters. I think I understand what that means now. They don't just attack. They study, plan, and then execute with precision." After 2 hours, they were called back to the chamber. Hyunwoo stood at the podium, and something in his posture suggested a decision had been made. "Commander Davin, the Council of Nations has reached a consensus. Humanity will intervene in the conflict with the Kraven swarm. However, our assistance comes with conditions." "Name them," Davin said. "First, the Galactic Council must officially recognize human sovereignty over the Sol system and a buffer zone of 10 light-years in all directions. No Council ships will enter this space without explicit permission." "Agreed." "Second, humanity will have full operational command of any military engagement we participate in. Your forces will follow our strategies and tactics without question." Davin hesitated. Giving tactical control to an unknown species was a significant risk. But looking at the human representatives, at their calm confidence, he realized they wouldn't accept anything less. "Agreed." "Third, after the swarm is defeated, humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all attendant rights and privileges. We will no longer hide. We will take our place among the spacefaring civilizations. The Council will have to vote on that, but I will advocate for it personally." Hyunwoo nodded. "Then we have an accord. Captain Jiwan will serve as liaison between human forces and the Council fleet. She will coordinate our initial response and assess the strategic situation firsthand. He paused, and his expression became harder. Commander, I need you to understand what you're asking of us. Humanity has spent 2 centuries building a peaceful civilization. We've moved beyond the violence that marked our early history. What we're about to do, the weapons we're about to unleash, it goes against everything we've tried to become. I understand, Davin said, though he wasn't sure he truly did. No, Yunwu said quietly. You don't, but you will. Humanity has one great talent, Commander. We're very good at killing things. It's written into our DNA, forged by millions of years of evolution on a world that tried constantly to kill us. We learned to fight back, and we got better at it than nature ever intended. He gestured to the windows, to the peaceful city beyond. All of this, our art and culture and philosophy, it's a thin veneer over something ancient and dark. You're about to see what humans become when we go to war. I pray you don't come to regret asking for our help. Davin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. He thought of the graveyard in space, of the cold efficiency of those kills, of humanity's 2-century preparation for a war that might never come. Now that war had arrived, and humanity was ready, perhaps too ready, when do we begin? Davin asked. Yunwu smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who had spotted prey. We already have. The first human fleet departed for Council space 3 days ago. They'll arrive at the Helian sector in 48 hours. I suggest you return to your ships and prepare your people for what comes next. What comes next? Mireille asked. Humanity's introduction to the galaxy, Yunwu said, and the swarm's introduction to a species that has been preparing for this fight since before they were born. War is in our bones, child. The Kraven are about to learn what that means. The journey back to Council space took 5 days. Davin spent that time aboard a human warship called the Indomitable, and every hour aboard taught him something new about the species he had invited into the war. The ship itself was a revelation. Where Council vessels were designed for comfort and efficiency, human ships were built for one purpose: combat. Every corridor could be sealed as a bulkhead. Every section had independent life support. The crew trained constantly, running combat drills with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Captain Jiwan gave him a tour on the second day. This is a Vanguard-class destroyer, she explained, leading him through narrow passages lined with conduits and machinery. Smaller than your capital ships, but faster and more maneuverable. We prefer Wolfpack tactics to slugging matches. Wolfpack? Davin asked. An old Earth predator. They hunt in coordinated groups using communication and strategy to bring down prey much larger than themselves. It's how humanity approaches warfare. We don't have the numbers your council does, so we compensate with tactics. They entered the weapons bay, and Davin stopped in shock. The room was filled with ordnance unlike anything he'd seen. Missiles that radiated heat even in storage, particle beam projectors that hummed with barely contained energy, and something that looked like it could tear a hole in space-time itself. Kinetic kill vehicles, Jiwan said, pointing to a rack of sleek projectiles, accelerated to 0.7 light speed. No shields can stop them because they're just mass and velocity, simple physics. They must use enormous amounts of energy, Taman observed. They do, which is why we use fusion reactors that would make your engineers weep with envy. We had 2 centuries to refine our technology, remember? While the Council was fighting political battles, we were solving engineering problems. Mireille examined a strange device mounted on the wall. What's this? Jiwan's expression darkened. That's an EMFB, electromagnetic fragmentation bomb. It releases a pulse that disrupts molecular bonds in organic tissue. We designed it specifically for the Kraven. Their ships are organic, so this weapon will tear them apart at the cellular level. That's horrifying, Mireille whispered. That's war, Jiwan corrected. You wanted humanity's help. This is what we bring to the table. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. The human crew fascinated Davin almost as much as their technology. They were young, most of them, barely into adulthood by Council standards. But they carried themselves with the confidence of veterans. Each one had trained their entire lives for combat, raised in a culture that remembered the trauma of near extinction. He watched them exercise in the ship's gymnasium, moving through combat drills that would have exhausted most species. They pushed themselves to the edge of collapse, then pushed further. Their bodies were compact but dense with muscle, adapted for their world's crushing gravity. They're warriors. Davin said to Mirai one evening in their assigned quarters. They're terrified, she corrected. Look closer. See how they train? They're not preparing to fight. They're preparing to survive. Every human on this ship knows they might die in the coming battle. So they train harder, hoping that extra effort will be the difference. She was right. Beneath the professionalism, Davin could see the fear. These weren't inhuman killing machines. They were people, scared people who had chosen to stand between their civilization and annihilation. It made them even more dangerous. On the 5th day, they emerged into the Helion sector. The devastation was worse than Davin remembered. 3 more colonies had fallen since his departure, and the Council fleet was in full retreat toward their last defensive line. The Indomitable's bridge erupted in controlled activity as sensors picked up the battlefield. Jiwan stood at the center, absorbing data from a dozen displays simultaneously. Craven formation detected. Estimate 4,000 individual vessels in a swarm configuration. Council forces are scattered across 3 sectors. No unified command structure. She turned to her communications officer. Signal the fleet. Execute pattern Theta. All ships acknowledge. Around them, space rippled as more human vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Davin counted 50 ships, a fraction of the Council forces present, but they moved with a unity that made them seem like a single organism. Commander Davin, Jiwan said, I'm giving you a direct communication link to Admiral Suhyun, who commands the Council's 2nd Fleet. Convince him to fall back to Rally Point Gamma and follow our lead. If he refuses, his fleet will be destroyed within the hour. Davin opened the channel. Admiral Suhyun's face appeared, his features drawn with exhaustion and frustration. Commander Davin? We thought you were dead. Where did you get that ship? It's a long story, Admiral, but I need you to listen carefully. Humanity is real and they're here to help, but you need to pull your fleet back and follow their tactical commands. Suhyun's expression cycled through disbelief, confusion, and desperate hope. Humanity? The myth? Not a myth, sir. Very real and very dangerous. Trust me on this. Fall back to their rally point. The Admiral looked off-screen, consulting with his staff. Then he nodded. We'll comply. At this point, we'll accept help from anyone. Transmitting retreat coordinates to all Council vessels. Jiwan had been listening. Good, now watch and learn. The human fleet split into 5 groups, each taking a different vector toward the Kraven swarm. They accelerated hard, using thrust levels that would have crushed most pilots. But humans had trained in high gravity their whole lives. They didn't just tolerate the G-forces. They thrived in them. The Kraven detected the approaching ships and responded, as they always did, forming a wall of vessels to envelope and overwhelm the enemy through sheer numbers. They're taking the bait, Jiwan said. Group Alpha, weapons free. Show them what we brought. The lead human ships unleashed their arsenal. Kinetic kill vehicles screamed across space at relativistic speeds. Too fast for the Kraven to evade. They punched through organic hulls like paper, each impact releasing energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. But the Kraven had faced kinetic weapons before. Their ships began regenerating, tissue flowing like water to seal the breaches. Deploy EMFB, Jiwan ordered. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through space, invisible but devastating. Where they touched Kraven vessels, the organic ships began to disintegrate. Cellular structures collapsed, unable to maintain cohesion. In seconds, hundreds of Kraven vessels simply fell apart, their fragments drifting as inert biological matter. The swarm recoiled, confusion rippling through their hive mind. They had never encountered a weapon that attacked their biology directly. Groups Beta and Gamma, flank positions. Delta and Epsilon, prepare the gravity anchors. The human ships moved with impossible coordination, surrounding the swarm from multiple angles. Then they deployed devices that Davin didn't recognize. Small satellites that began emitting a field that distorted space-time itself. Gravity anchors? Taman breathed. They've weaponized gravity manipulation? Borrowed the concept from Thrain technology, Jiwan said. But we made it lethal. Watch. The gravity field intensified, creating a well that pulled the Kraven ships toward the center. They tried to escape, but their organic drives couldn't generate enough thrust to overcome the artificial gravity. The swarm collapsed on itself, ships colliding and entangling in a mass of confused biology. Now, Jiwan said quietly, fire the lance. One of the human ships, larger than the others, moved to optimal range. Its bow opened, revealing a weapon that made Davin's blood run cold. It was a particle accelerator, kilometers long when fully extended, capable of generating a beam that could pierce a planet. The lance fired. A column of coherent energy struck the center of the craven mass. It burned through organic tissue, metal, and anything else in its path. The beam lasted for 3 seconds, and when it dissipated, a tunnel had been carved through the swarm. Thousands of Kraven vessels had simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures that matched the heart of a star. The remaining Kraven, their hive mind reeling from the catastrophic losses, did something they had never done before. They retreated. The battle had lasted 12 minutes. G1 turned to Davin. That's how humanity fights. We study the enemy, identify weaknesses, and exploit them with overwhelming force. The Kraven are powerful, but they're predictable. They rely on numbers and regeneration. We took away both advantages. Davin stared at the tactical display, at the scattered remains of a swarm that had destroyed dozens of council fleets. How many ships did you lose? None. We took damage on 7 vessels, but nothing critical. We'll have them repaired within a day. Impossible, Taman whispered. Not impossible. Calculated. G1 pulled up a holographic display showing the entire battle from multiple angles. We simulated this engagement 4,000 times before we left Earth. We knew every move the Kraven would make because we studied your combat logs. We prepared for every contingency. When humans go to war, we don't improvise. We plan. Admiral Suhyun's face appeared on the communication screen. Commander Davin, what in the name of the ancients did I just witness? The future of this war, Admiral, Davin said. Humanity has entered the fight. Then perhaps we have a chance after all, Suhyun said, his voice filled with wonder and relief. Captain G1, the Council fleet is at your disposal. Tell us what you need. G1 nodded. Prepare for a counteroffensive. The swarm is retreating now, but they'll regrow. The war changed overnight. What had been a slow retreat toward extinction became a calculated campaign of extermination. Humanity didn't just fight the Kraven. They hunted them. Over the next 3 months, Davin witnessed the transformation of galactic warfare. Human strategists studied every Kraven attack, every swarm movement, every biological adaptation. They identified patterns invisible to council analysts, weaknesses hidden in the hive mind's apparent perfection. The humans called it total information warfare. Every battle generated data. Every encounter revealed something new. And humanity processed that information with a speed that terrified even their allies. Davin stood in the command center of what humans called Firebase Omega, a massive orbital station they had constructed in just 6 weeks. The station served as the central coordination hub for the entire anti-swarm campaign, its computers analyzing data from thousands of sources simultaneously. Commander Minho ran the operation, a lean man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He had explained the strategy to Davin on the first day. We're not fighting a war. We're solving a problem. The Kraven are an invasive species that has grown out of control. Our job is to return them to manageable numbers or eliminate them entirely. The clinical nature of that statement had chilled Davin. Humans talked about extinction-level warfare the way others discussed pest control, but it was effective. Horribly, brutally effective. New contact, one of the human analysts called out. Kraven swarm emerging in the Talus system. Estimate 7,000 vessels. Minho studied the tactical display. Deploy Hunter Group Sigma. Have them use Protocol 8. I want that swarm scattered and demoralized within 2 hours. Hunter Group Sigma, acknowledging. ETA 40 minutes. Davin watched the display as human ships moved into position. They no longer waited for the Kraven to attack. They intercepted swarms in transit, ambushed them at resource gathering points, destroyed their breeding colonies before they could produce new vessels. The humans had learned something crucial. The Kraven weren't an infinite force. They needed resources, time, and space to reproduce. Cut off those requirements and the swarm would starve. How do you coordinate so many ships? Taman asked, watching data stream across dozens of displays. Minho gestured to a device on his wrist. Neural interface technology. Every human commander wears one. It allows us to share tactical awareness in real time, processing information faster than verbal communication. We think together, like a hive mind. but each of us retains individual creativity. You made yourselves into what you're fighting, Mirai observed quietly. No, Minho corrected. We learned from what we're fighting. The Kraven's strength is their unity. Their weakness is their predictability. We took the first and discarded the second. That's what humans do. We adapt. A new alert flashed across the display. This one made even Minho pause. Report, he ordered. We've located the Kraven Nexus, the analyst said, her voice tight with excitement. The source colony, where their hive queen resides. The command center fell silent. Every species that had fought the Kraven had sought their nexus, the central point from which the hive mind originated. Destroying it would theoretically collapse the entire swarm, but no one had ever found it. Show me, Minho said. The display shifted, showing a region of space on the galactic rim. A massive organic structure hung in the void, larger than any station or ship. It pulsed with bioluminescent light, and around it swarmed millions of Kraven vessels in protective layers. Estimated defensive forces? Minho asked. At least 40,000 ships in close orbit. Millions more within a day's travel. It's the most heavily defended location we've ever encountered. Minho studied the display for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Send a message to Earth, request full authorization for Operation Prometheus. What's Operation Prometheus? Davin asked. Minho's expression was grim. The end of this war. One way or another, the authorization came 6 hours later. Admiral Suhyun arrived at Firebase Omega with representatives from every major council species. They gathered in the briefing room, where Minho presented humanity's final solution to the swarm problem. Operation Prometheus is a decapitation strike, he explained. Using holographic projections to illustrate, we're going to destroy the Kraven Nexus and their hive queen. This will collapse their command structure and reduce them to individual uncoordinated vessels that can be eliminated systematically. The defenses are too strong, Suhyun protested. Even with human tactics, we'd lose thousands of ships trying to penetrate those layers. We're not going to penetrate them, Minho said. We're going to go through them, literally. He enlarged a section of the display showing a device that looked like a massive ring. This is a wormhole generator. Experimental technology we've been developing for 50 years. It creates a temporary tunnel through space-time, allowing instantaneous transit between 2 points. That's impossible, a Thrain scientist said. The energy requirements alone would require a star's entire output, which is why we're using a star, Minho said. We've constructed a Dyson sphere around an uninhabited system's sun. It's been collecting energy for 3 months. We have enough power for one jump. One chance? The room erupted in overlapping conversations. The technology Minho described was beyond anything the council had imagined. A Dyson sphere, a wormhole generator. Humans had built weapons that made them more dangerous than the Kraven themselves. Davin raised his voice. How many ships will participate in this strike? All of them, Minho said. Every human warship we have. Every council vessel that wants to join us. We're going to open a wormhole directly into the Nexus's inner perimeter and unleash everything we have. It will be the largest military operation in galactic history. And if it fails? Mirai asked. Minho met her gaze steadily. Then humanity will activate Protocol Omega. We'll ignite the Dyson sphere's collected energy in a directed gamma-ray burst aimed at the Nexus. It will destroy everything within 10 light-years, including all of our ships. But it will also eliminate the Kraven threat permanently. The room fell silent. The humans were willing to sacrifice their entire fleet, commit species suicide, to stop the swarm. It was the most human thing Davin had ever heard. If we can't win, we'll make sure the enemy doesn't either. That's madness, someone whispered. That's survival, Jiwan said, stepping forward. She had been quiet until now, but her voice carried absolute conviction. 200 years ago, an alien species tried to exterminate humanity. We survived by being willing to do whatever was necessary. The Kraven are the same threat on a larger scale. We will stop them, or we will die stopping them. Those are the only acceptable outcomes. Admiral Suhyun looked at the other council representatives. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. When do we begin? Suhyun asked. Assembly will take 3 weeks, Minho said. We need to position all forces near the wormhole generator without alerting the Kraven. Then we jump, we strike, and we end this war. Davin approached Minho after the briefing. You're really willing to sacrifice everything? Commander, Humanity spent 2 centuries alone preparing for a war we hoped would never come. We built weapons that scared us, developed tactics that violated our ethics, turned our entire civilization into a military machine, all because we refused to be victims again. He looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. If we die stopping the swarm, at least we die on our terms. That's more than most species get. The next 3 weeks were a frenzy of preparation. Ships from across the council gathered near the Dyson Sphere, a marvel of engineering that enclosed an entire star in solar collection panels. Human engineers worked alongside council technicians, sharing technology that had been secret for centuries. Mirai spent her time documenting everything. She had become humanity's unofficial chronicler, recording their culture, technology, and philosophy. If Operation Prometheus failed, she wanted someone to know what humans had been. On the final night before the operation, Davin found her in the observation deck staring at the Dyson Sphere. "Do you think we'll survive this?" she asked. "The humans have given us better odds than we had 3 months ago," Davin said. "That's something." "They're extraordinary," Mirai said softly, "and terrifying. They've shown us what a species can become when driven by fear and determination. I hope the galaxy remembers them if this fails." "The galaxy will remember them regardless," Davin said. "They've changed everything. After this, no one will ever look at humanity as a myth again. For better or worse, they've proven they belong among the stars." The next morning, 5,000 ships gathered at the wormhole generator. Human vessels formed the spearhead, their aggressive designs a stark contrast to the more elegant council ships. But they moved as one force, united by the simple desire to survive. Commander Minho's voice broadcast across every ship. "All forces, this is command. Operation Prometheus is go. When we jump, we'll have 30 minutes before the wormhole collapses. In that time, we need to destroy the Nexus and eliminate the Hive Queen. There is no retreat. There is no second chance. We succeed or we die trying." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "To all council forces joining us, thank you for trusting humanity with your lives. We know we haven't earned that trust yet, but today, we'll prove we're worthy of it. To all human forces, remember why we fight." The transition through the wormhole felt like dying and being reborn in the same instant. Davin's perception fractured into impossible dimensions before snapping back into normal space. The Indomitable shuddered, alarms screaming as systems struggled to compensate for the violent transit. Then the sensors cleared, and Davin saw hell. The Kraven Nexus filled the view screen, a biological nightmare the size of a small moon. Organic towers spiraled from its surface, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that suggested both beauty and horror. And surrounding it, like antibodies defending a cell, were thousands upon thousands of Kraven vessels. The human fleet emerged from the wormhole in perfect formation, already firing. Kinetic kill vehicles screamed across space. Particle beams carved burning lines through organic hulls. The electromagnetic fragmentation bombs deployed, their invisible pulses turning Kraven ships into clouds of disintegrating tissue. But the swarm responded with terrifying speed. The hive mind, recognizing the threat to its core, threw everything it had at the invaders. Kraven ships swarmed the human formation, attacking with suicidal fury. "All ships maintain formation," Jiwan commanded from the Indomitable's bridge. "Focus fire on the Nexus's towers. Those are the Queen's communication organs. Sever them and the hive mind starts to fragment." The battle became chaos. Ships exploded on both sides, debris filling space like a metal storm. A Kraven vessel rammed into a council destroyer, both ships disintegrating in a flash of released energy. Human fighters weaved through the swarm, their pilots pulling maneuvers that would have killed anyone not trained in high gravity. Davin watched his tactical display, seeing the battle in abstract numbers. They were losing ships faster than projected. The Kraven were defending their Nexus with everything they had, and their number seemed endless. "We're not going to make it," Taman said, his voice tight with fear. "There are too many of them." "Have faith in human planning," Jiwan said, her hands flying across her controls. "We haven't revealed all our cards yet. Group Delta. Execute Phase 2. A squadron of human ships broke from the main formation, accelerating toward the Nexus at impossible speeds. They were smaller craft, lightly armed and armored. Davin didn't understand their purpose until they got close to the organic structure. They weren't carrying weapons. They were carrying people. Those are boarding ships, Mirai gasped. They're going inside the Nexus. The Queen is too deep inside for our weapons to reach, Jiwan explained. So we're going to her. Those ships carry our best ground forces. Marines who have trained their entire lives for close-quarters combat. If they can reach the Queen's chamber, they can kill her directly. That's suicide, Davin said. That's the mission, Jiwan corrected. Those Marines volunteered. They know they probably won't come back, but they also know that if they succeed, this war ends today. The boarding ships punch through the Nexus's outer membrane, disappearing into the biological structure. On Jiwan's tactical display, Davin could see green dots representing the Marines as they fought through twisting corridors of living tissue. Outside, the space battle intensified. More ships arrived responding to the Queen's distress calls. The combined fleet was being surrounded, cut off from their escape route. The wormhole flickered in the distance, destabilizing as its power reserves depleted. Wormhole collapse in 15 minutes, the navigation officer reported. Jiwan opened a channel to all ships. All forces, this is Captain Jiwan. We're committed now. No retreat until the mission is complete. Buy the Marines time, whatever it costs. The fleet shifted formation, creating a defensive sphere around the Nexus. They were no longer trying to destroy it. They were holding ground, keeping the Kraven occupied while their Marines completed the impossible task of killing a Hive Queen. Davin felt helpless watching the battle unfold. Ships died by the dozens, good people he'd served with, incinerated in nuclear fire or torn apart by organic weapons. The Council forces fought bravely, but it was the humans who held the line. They fought with a ferocity that transcended mere tactics or training. This was personal for them. This was revenge for 2 centuries of isolation, for ancestors who had died in the First Contact War, for the fear that had defined their civilization. Inside the Nexus, the Marines pushed deeper. Davin watched their progress on the tactical display, each green dot representing someone's son or daughter, fighting through a living nightmare. A voice crackled over the command channel, rough with strain and filtered through a helmet. This is Marine Captain Young-ho. We've reached the Queen's chamber. Beginning assault. The display showed the Marines' life signs spiking as they encountered the Queen's defenders. Whatever guarded the chamber was formidable enough to kill half the squad in seconds. Status, Jiwan demanded. Heavy resistance, Young-ho's voice came back, punctuated by weapon fire. The Queen is larger than we anticipated. Conventional weapons aren't penetrating her armor. Switching to plasma charges. Wormhole collapse in 10 minutes, the navigation officer warned. Jiwan's jaw tightened. They were running out of time. If the wormhole collapsed before the Marines killed the Queen, they would be trapped here. All 5,000 ships stranded in enemy territory with no way home. Captain Young-ho, you need to hurry, she said. Working on it, he replied, his voice strained. This thing has multiple redundant organs. We're cutting through defensive tissue now. If we can reach the neural complex, we can end this. Outside, the battle reached a crescendo. The Kraven, sensing their Queen's danger, threw themselves at the human fleet with renewed desperation. A massive organic ship, larger than anything they'd encountered before, emerged from behind the Nexus. It began firing biological weapons that ate through shields and hull plating like acid. That's a Kraven dreadnought. Suyun's voice cut through the chaos. Council's Second Fleet moving to intercept. Negative, Jiwan said. We need every ship holding this perimeter. I'll handle the dreadnought. She turned to her crew. All power to forward weapons. Target that dreadnought's central mass. We're going to punch a hole through it. Captain, that will leave us defenseless, her weapons officer protested. I know. Do it anyway. The Indomitable's weapons charged, drawing power from every system, including life support. The ship went dark except for the glow of the massive particle accelerator extending from its bow. Then it fired, releasing a beam of coherent energy that could have been mistaken for a piece of a star. The beam struck the dreadnought dead center. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive ship began to come apart, its cellular structure unable to withstand the temperature and radiation. It collapsed inward, imploding into an expanding cloud of organic debris. But the shot had drained the Indomitable's power reserves. The ship went dark, systems failing, shields collapsing. All crew brace for impact, Jiwan said calmly. Kraven vessels swarmed toward the disabled ship. Davin watched helplessly as death approached, knowing there was nothing anyone could do. Then council ships moved to intercept, throwing themselves between the Indomitable and the swarm. They fought with a desperation that matched the humans, protecting the species that had given them hope. Wormhole collapse in 5 minutes, someone reported. Inside the Nexus, Captain Young-Ho's voice returned. We've reached the neural complex. Planting charges now. How long until detonation? Jiwan asked. 30 seconds. All remaining Marines fall back to extraction point. But Davin could see on the tactical display that there was no extraction point. The boarding ships had been destroyed, covering the Marines' advance. There was no way out. Young-Ho knew it too. It's been an honor serving with you all, he said quietly. Tell Earth we finished the mission. Young-Ho, wait, Jiwan began. But the channel went dead. The tactical display showed a massive energy spike inside the Nexus. The charges detonated, not just destroying the Queen, but triggering a chain reaction through the organic structure. The Nexus began tearing itself apart from within, and in that moment the hive mind broke. Across the battlefield, Kraven vessels suddenly lost coordination. They stopped moving in perfect formation, started colliding with each other, firing randomly. The unified consciousness that had made them so dangerous had shattered with their Queen's death. All ships, the mission is complete, G1 announced, her voice heavy with grief and triumph. Fall back to the wormhole. Emergency speed. The fleet turned as one, racing toward the flickering portal. Behind them, the Nexus collapsed in on itself, a dying giant taking thousands of Kraven ships with it. The surviving swarm vessels, now operating on instinct rather than intelligence, made no coordinated attempt to pursue. The wormhole was destabilizing fast, reality itself fraying at its edges. Ships plunged through in a desperate stream, some making it, others catching the edge of the collapse and being torn apart by competing gravitational forces. The Indomitable, its engines barely functional, limped toward the portal. They were going to be the last ship through, maybe too late. Come on, Mireille whispered, gripping her seat. Come on. The ship crossed the threshold just as the wormhole collapsed behind them. The transition was violent, tearing at the already damaged vessel. Systems exploded across the bridge, and emergency bulkheads sealed automatically. When the Indomitable emerged back into normal space near the Dyson sphere, 2/3 of the fleet had made it through.